Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Sandy McDonald and I'm the Director of the Office of Economic and Small Business Development. We want to thank you for joining our workshop today. I don't know if you intentionally got here, accidentally got here, or you read the newsletter, but what you see on that screen is factual. Is that legal? You know, if I win this Broward County contract, I'm gonna get as many small businesses as I can to just help me complete this contract. The businesses might not be certified. I know I said that I'm a CBE and I'm gonna do all the work, but I just gotta get the work done. You know, this prime contractor asked me to work for him, and I'm gonna go ahead and take this contract. But at the end of the day, maybe I'll just get this prime contractor to pay me something. He can use my employees and we'll just fill out the paperwork. Well, you know, at the end of the day, I got this contract and I'm working with this prime, and this prime is extremely slow about paying me. I don't know if I can call the county's office, or I don't know what communications I ought to have with the prime. Maybe I'll just challenge the prime and see what happens. Businesses, we are here today to talk about, is that legal? We're going to give you three perspectives from very highly qualified individuals who can help us as an office share some things that we want to make sure that you are aware of, some things that we want to make sure that you're not doing, and some things that we believe that can be preventive in helping you to make sure that a part or this part of your relationship with Broward County as a small business, winning a contract directly through the county or being a subcontractor under a prime, that you have a smooth transition and opportunity to do that which you do best. What you do best is perform. But we often say, while you're working in your business, it's without question, you still got to work on your business. Working on your business is creating other opportunities, also making sure that your paperwork is right, your financials is right, your legal advice is right. And again, as you know, from my office, we share a lot. We disseminate a lot of information. We make sure you have access to resources. We don't advise. We don't counsel. We can't advise you. We can't counsel you, but we can share information with you and make sure you know where to go to get the assistance that you need. So again, this is the Office of Economic and Small Business Development. You know, we do workshops on a regular basis. We are an office. You can go to the next slide, Savika. We're an office who, at the end of the day, just wants to assure that businesses, based on the county's commitment through the Business Opportunity Act, have an opportunity, if the business choose, to participate in our procurement. That's my contact information. Those are ways to follow us on social media, from Facebook to Twitter to YouTube and Instagram. We're also on Instagram. Next slide. The other part you need to know in dealing with today, this is a snapshot of our office. This is who we are. This is what we do. We're also known in that bottom right box as a service agency. To your benefit, we are a service agency because any county agency, business, or organization that's looking to procure a good, material, service, or product, we get to review that procurement opportunity to see if we have small businesses that can provide that service. And if so, the Business Opportunity Act, the Small Business Program, kicks in. Some opportunities are from my SBE, Small Business Enterprise. Some are from my CBE, County Business Enterprise. But we also operate the federal program, which is DBE and ACDBE. You can go to my website or come back for another workshop to learn more about that federal program. But we want to make sure you understand, as an office, who we are. Next slide. And if you happen to be here and you're not certified, we're always encouraging small businesses to get certified. There's so many projects and activities that are underway, some that are still coming up on the horizon, that without question, we have room to grow more small business opportunities. So if you're a small business in Broward County, or if you're in South Florida and you're thinking about expanding to Broward County, take a good look at our certification program. All the information is online. You can submit your application online, upload your documents online, and we're going to try to make sure we can get at you 45 days or less in getting you certified, and then continuing, not just to certify you, to work with you to make sure that you can navigate and understand the process, because the certification isn't it for us. It's the beginning for us and the beginning for you. Post certification, I need to make sure that you can participate in the process so you can competitively one day participate in the bids, so I can see you winning contracts. The program in its entirety is about you making money. You making money, you're spending money, you're hiring folks in our community. That helps to grow our community as a greater good. So Get Certified is our campaign we started back in January 2020, and it is a push to grow the number of small businesses in Broward, but not just grow the number. Grow the number of those participating, and grow the number of those winning contracts. It is about the win. Next slide. So today, you often hear this. I get to repeat it, and I don't know where you heard it from, but from me, it's factual. Today, I got 3 rock stars. I have 3 individuals who's going to share with you. We're going to keep that theme. Is it legal? I have Sandy Steed, who's going to give you a Broward County's perspective. She works in my office very close on the Business Opportunity Act. Just things you really should know and understand as you consider being a certified small business while being a certified small business, understanding the preamble of how the county has set this up to aid you. Then I have Wendy Wilson. Here's the thing, guys. I often tell you when you're going through my workshops or my certification, you need to understand everything that my staff and I do, we're not attorneys. There's some basic to some major things you need to know about having a business, and especially having a business dealing with government. Wendy's going to just tell you about some of those things across the board, and specifically what's happening at legal aid that may be of assistance to you, because we understand all small businesses are not in a position immediately to be having that retainer for that major attorney. But you always, since day one of starting your business, should have some legal guidance and advice. And then I have Lisa. Lisa is truly someone who understands construction, contracts, prime contractors, and small business. And she really wants to come to you on our behalf, making sure you're clear of what your role is, especially in commercial and construction contracts, working with primes, what your opportunities are, and how you ought to be presenting yourself and understanding from a legal perspective what opportunities not only present themselves, but based on those opportunities, how they're aligned with doing good business. We often tell you about getting in and our opportunities for you to meet the goal, and now you're working with the prime. That's not the end, just getting an agreement and working with the prime. Do you really understand how to work that job, nurture that job, create that relationship by which the expectancy of the prime, based on what you do and what you deliver, there's a potential that that prime latches onto you and carry you on contracts beyond the county. She has an expertise and background in construction contracts and working with primes as well as small businesses. So these 3 individuals are going to answer that question for us today. Is that legal? Next slide. Discussion topics: understanding the Broward County Business Opportunity Act, small business legal services, construction contractor services. Those are the 3 bullets to what I just took 3 minutes to say. Next slide. And with that, I get to introduce you to the person that I'm getting to work with more on a regular basis. She's assigned to our office as well as other county agencies, but I'm gonna see if we can steal her exclusively for us, but somebody will get mad about that later. Want to introduce you to Sandy Steed, Assistant County Attorney, Broward County's Attorney's Office. And Sandy, thank you for joining us today. And by all means, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandy, for having me. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandy Steed. I am an Assistant County Attorney with the Broward County Attorney's Office. I provide legal representation for OESBD and the Employee Benefits section of the Human Resources Division. I also handle a number of other general transactional matters. It's my pleasure to be here to speak with all of you today about legal matters that impact your small business from the county's perspective. I would like to first begin by giving a little background about the County Attorney's Office and our role within the county. Next slide, please. Next slide. The Broward County Attorney's Office is created by charter Andrew J. Myers serves as the Broward County Attorney, and he is supported by deputies and assistant county attorneys. Our office provides a full range of legal services and perform both transactional services and litigation. Our clients include the Board of County Commissioners, the Office of County Administrator, and all agencies under their oversight. We do not represent or provide counsel to the public. Next slide, please. My presentation today will primarily focus on contracts with the county, including material terms and county contracts, and a very brief overview of the Public Records Act. I will also discuss the primary reference for all things CBE and SBE, which is the Business Opportunity Act. Next slide. So every transaction that the county is involved in requires some sort of contract that includes the relationship between the parties, the terms that the parties are agreeing to, and certain provisions that county as a governmental entity must include in its agreement. Because the county is constantly entering into contracts, many of which are very similar in nature, the county attorney's office has developed a number of template agreements that we tailor for each specific contract. The template agreement includes provisions to ensure we are compliant with the law, as well as certain provisions that are meant to protect the county as a steward of public funds. And as a small business, if you enter into a contract with the county, you'll see many of these provisions in your contract. Next slide, please. The template agreements are known as BCS, or Broward County Forms. They can actually be found on the county's website at the link that is in the slide. You can also just search Broward County Standard Agreement Terms and Conditions in Google, and the page will come up. BCFs are usually the starting point for most county transactions. We have a number of different BCFs depending on the type of transaction. The most common BCF is BCF 101, which is used for most general transactions. Next slide, please. In addition to the BCFs and the standard exhibits for each one, our office has developed a number of other form documents and exhibits that are applicable only to certain contracts. We have a business associate agreement, which is used when the county may be providing protected health information to a vendor. Work authorization, which is used when approving optional services or goods. Federal funding exhibit, which is used when federal dollars are involved and contains federally required provisions. Sponsorship and grant agreements, which are used when the county is giving grants or sponsorships to individual organizations. OESBD uses these sorts of agreements when they give grants to small businesses under their BMSD grant programs and various other programs that they offer. And then we have concession agreements, which are used to authorize private businesses to operate a facility or provide a service on county-owned or county-operated or operated property. As you can see, just about everything we do here at the county is formalized into some sort of agreement. Next slide, please. As part of our BCS, there are certain standard provisions that are meant to satisfy state and federal law, local ordinances, and to protect the county as a steward of public funds. And this is a list of just some of those provisions that are included in our agreement forms. Next slide, please. As a vendor entering into a contract with the county, there are some laws that you should be aware of. One of the most important or most relevant is the Public Records Act. The Public Records Act provides the right of access to records of state and local government, as well as to private entities acting on their behalf. So if you enter into a contract with the county, you will fall under the private entities acting on their behalf when you're providing services on behalf of the county. Next slide, please. A public record is any document or communication, regardless of the means of transmission, that is made or received pursuant to law or ordinance, or in connection with the transaction of official business by any agency, including a private entity acting on behalf of a public agency, that is used to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge. If material falls within the definition of public record and is not subject to a statutory exemption, it must be disclosed. So if an entity enters into a contract with the county where the entity is providing goods or services on behalf of the county, that entity will also be subject to the requirements of the Act. This means that the entity must keep and maintain records required by county to perform the services. provide county with a copy of any requested records, or allow the records to be inspected or copied within a reasonable time. And upon completion or termination of the contract, transfer all public records to the county or keep and maintain them in accordance with the statute. All requests for public records must be made directly to the county, who is responsible for responding to any such public records requests. Next slide, please. Public records must be disclosed unless there is a statutory exemption from disclosure. One such exemption that may be relevant for businesses is trade secrets. Any material that a vendor claims constitutes a trade secret as defined in Florida Statute Section 688.002 must submit the trade secret materials separately and must clearly label the materials as exempt from public production due to trade secret and the factual basis for the designation. So this also comes into play during our procurement process when vendors are submitting responses to solicitations. Whenever you are submitting anything that constitutes a trade secret, you have to submit it separately and you have to mark it as a trade secret. So if county receives a public record request for documents that have been properly identified as trade secrets, the county is prohibited from disclosing the trade secret unless ordered by a court or authorized in writing by the vendor. Next slide, please. Now, once the contract has been negotiated between the county and the vendor and is ready for execution, the board, unless authority is otherwise delegated, and the board is the Board of County Commissioners, must approve and execute the document. Situations in which the board must execute is when the contract exceeds 5 years or a contract is being extended beyond 5 years through an amendment. County agreements are typically 5 years or less, but they are sometimes extended through an amendment. The board may also approve and execute contracts that exceed $500,000 in the aggregate, inclusive of amendments, extensions, and renewals. The Director of Purchasing is authorized to execute agreements that are less than $500,000 in the aggregate. For the vendor or the small business, an authorized representative must sign on behalf of the vendor, either by hand or digital signature. We also require some confirmation of authority, either through a corporate resolution confirming that the signatory is authorized to sign on behalf of the entity, or the individual being listed as a current officer for the corporation or a current member of an LLC on sunbiz.org. Next slide, please. Next is the Broward County Business Opportunity Act, which is an ordinance that is designed to ensure that small Broward County-based businesses are provided sufficient opportunities to meaningfully participate in the award of county-funded contracts as prime contractors and subcontractors. If you ever have any questions related to CBEs or SBEs, the Business Opportunity Act is the first source you should reference. The Act establishes eligibility criteria and continued certification requirements for CBEs and SBEs. CBE goal requirements, parameters for CBE and SBE reserve solicitations, requirements for the satisfaction of CBE goals, enforcement mechanisms, penalties for violations of the Act, decertification and appeals, program graduation, and procurement preferences. Today, I will just focus on the CBE goal requirements for the satisfaction of CBE goals, and recent changes to the Act. Next slide, please. As I previously stated, the Act addresses both CBEs and SBEs. However, the 25% goal requirement mentioned in the ordinance only relates to CBEs. SBE goals are only applicable to SBE reserve procurements where the value of the contract is less than $250,000, in which case the prime contractor is the SBE and the goal is 100% participation. The Act also establishes at least a 25% CBE participation goal for each county contract, except for contracts that are subject to other participation goals, such as the federal DDE program, which Sandy previously mentioned, or SBE reserves. Contracts that are exempt from the county's procurement code, contracts that are ineligible by state or federal law, and contracts that are not assigned goals, such as emergency contracts. So all of those types of contracts are pretty much exempt from CBE goals. The board may at any time waive or modify CBE goals based upon a written determination provided by OESBD that establishes certain facts. Although the Act requires a minimum of 25% CBE participation based upon the value of the contract, the CBE goal may actually be lower with board or county administrator approval or higher. CBE goals are set as a percentage of the total contract value. The contract value is the total amount payable by county to the prime contractor, excluding any costs or other reimbursable amounts that the county is required to pay pursuant to the contract. Next slide, please. A prime contractor may satisfy the requirements of the Act by either, one, meeting the goal, by having commercially useful participation of CBEs, or two, by showing that the prime contractor made good faith efforts to meet the established goal. The director of OESBD, with Sandy Michael, is responsible for making the determination as to whether good faith efforts were made. Section 1-81.5D of the Act lists the factors that the director considers in making such a determination. Now, as far as meeting the goal, only the work that's actually performed by a CBE or SBE is applicable, whether as a prime contractor or subcontractor can be counted towards satisfaction of the goal. And entities may not participate as CBEs or SBEs unless they are certified as CBEs or SBEs prior to either the bid submittal or at the time that the letters of intent for that particular CBE or SBE is submitted to the county. A CBE may be substituted after the approval of the program director if it becomes necessary to substitute a CBE in order to meet the contract participation requirements. Next slide, please. So recent changes to the Business Opportunity Act. Now, I had the pleasure of drafting many of these code revisions with Sandy Michael in his office. So I'm very familiar with what they contain. So the first one is in December 2020, the board enacted an amendment to the Business Opportunity Act, which established certain parameters for CBE reserve solicitations. For CBE reserve solicitations, both CBEs and non-CBEs are able to submit proposals. However, the ordinance amendment ensures that a CBE that is within a certain monetary and point differential of a non-CBE is awarded the contract. And on the screen, you can see the points differential and the monetary differential. Now, if a non-CBE is awarded the contract because there are no CBEs that meet those point differentials or monetary differentials that's mentioned in the ordinance, or there's no responsive and responsible CBE that submits a proposal, then the contract must include a 25% CBE goal, unless it's waived or modified by the board. Now, this change ensures that even if a CBE is not awarded the contract, CBEs will still have the opportunity to participate as subcontractors. And on September 9th, the board approved a change to the act that would allow the county administrator to approve waivers or changes to the 25% CBE goal requirement for solicitations with an anticipated value of $500,000 or less. So previously, only the board could approve that sort of change. Now, also at its meeting on September 9th, the board approved changes to the act that will expand its application to ground leases of county-owned property that are for a duration of 1 year or longer, where the lessee is permitted or required to construct upon or improve the leased property. This expansion in the application of CBE goals will give more opportunities to small businesses to participate in the economic development of the county. Now, on an unrelated topic that I do not have a slide for, I know that Lisa will be addressing procurement-related issues in her presentation. But one important point that I just want to mention that impacts small businesses is the county's cone of silence. The cone of silence is located at section 1-266 of the Broward County Code of Ordinances and prohibits communication between a vendor and certain county personnel and commissioners. It's important to know when the cone of silence is in effect and who you can and cannot communicate with while it is in effect. Violations of the cone of silence can lead to fines or even debarment. Small businesses may unknowingly violate the cone of silence, and unfortunately, the intent doesn't matter. So please make sure when you submit a proposal for a county solicitation You review the cone of silence to ensure that your business does not unintentionally violate it. You should also review the summary of vendor rights regarding Broward County competitive solicitations, which can be found in the solicitation documents and in the procurement code. So in summary, Broward County offers many opportunities for small businesses to not only participate in county projects, but to also grow their business. OESBD is a great resource for all things small business, and they offer a variety of programs that are targeted to small businesses. I look forward to seeing some of your business names on future contracts that I work on. Thank you for your time, and thank you to Sandy and OESBD for inviting me to participate in this informative event.
Well, Sandy, Steve, we want to thank you, and that was very good and substantive information. And guys, you may have heard me in other workshops kind of give a 30,000 view of it. But as Ms. Steve spoke to, she gave you the specifics. She gave you the document that you all need to know, the Business Opportunity Act. You often hear me talk about program, process, people. One of the questions I just responded to in the QA, and I must say that if you have questions for our speakers or for me later, please put your questions in the Q&A. We will try to get to your questions. The speakers, as well as myself, will try to be answering your questions. But at the end of all three speakers, we will be taking questions to make sure we can put them out here for everyone. But the thing that Ms. Steed introduced that I speak to often, program, process, people. When I say program, you advantage yourself by knowing the program. She told you if you really want to understand certification, it's written in the Business Opportunity Act. If you really want to understand what the county's commitment is to small business, that at least 25% is written in the small business, is written in the Business Opportunity Act. If you really want to understand the difference between sheltered market reserve, SBE, and CBE, those definitions are written in the Business Opportunity Act. The more you know about the Business Opportunity Act, or at least making sure you have access to the Business Opportunity Act, by truly knowing what the county's intent is for the utilization of small businesses and how primes must work with our small businesses and how small businesses and primes will be evaluated based on the program, that buzzword, good faith effort. Knowing the program is the beginning of putting you in the best position to be competitive for bids. It's certainly one of the ways to put you in the best position when working with our prime contractors to assure that you're following what's required, and yes, to make sure that the prime is following what's required. So again, thank you, Sandy. Great information. We'll make sure everyone has access to the Business Opportunity Act. And again, any questions you have for Sandy Steed, let's put those in the Q&A. She might start typing some of those answers. The ones that aren't answered by the time we're done with all of our presenters, we're certainly going to have enough time for Q&A. So with that, we're going to go to Ms. Wilson, Ms. Wendy Wilson, Supervisor and Attorney for Florida Community Development Legal Projects. Wendy worked with us on another workshop. So thank you again for coming back and working with us and sharing information today with our small business. And the floor is yours.
Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That's going to be a hard presentation to follow, Sandy. There's a lot of good information there. So I don't see my slides up. There we go. So I'm going to be discussing pitfalls to avoid with your small business and also tell you a little bit about our program. Next slide, please. Legal aid, we participate with 5 or 6 other legal aid organizations in a statewide collaboration called Florida Community Development Legal Project. And we have funding from the Florida Bar Foundation, as well as a major financial institution to provide free legal assistance to qualifying small businesses. And our 2 funding sources have different income qualifications, but at the end of the presentation, I'm going to put up a slide with our contact information. And if you do need legal assistance, you can contact us and we can see if you qualify income wise for our program. Next slide, please. Like I said, we work with businesses that are owned by low to moderate income individuals, businesses that are creating low income jobs. And we also work with nonprofits, but I realize that everybody here today is probably with a for-profit business. Next slide, please. This is a list of some of the services that we provide, but most importantly, we do a lot of contract review, negotiating, and drafting, everything from commercial leases, county contracts, non-disclosures, independent contractor agreements for people that want to hire your business or that you may want to hire for your business. We do real estate and financial closings, dispute resolution. So that almost anything that you have within, we don't handle litigation for our clients. But at any rate, as I said, if you have a legal issue, you can contact us and see if you qualify. Next slide. I do just want to say at the beginning of this presentation that this is just general legal information. It's not specific to your situation, so you really can't rely on it. And we would urge you that if you do have a legal situation, to speak with an attorney about your own specifics. Next slide. The first pitfall that I'm going to discuss is the failure to have a governing agreement. Next slide. What are business governing agreements and why do you need them? It's basically to establish rules for your business that govern how the business is going to be operated. Next slide. They have different names depending on the type of entity that you have. If you have a partnership, it's a partnership agreement. When you have a corporation, they're the bylaws. And then when you have an LLC, it's an operating agreement. Next slide. Are the incorporation documents or organization documents that you file with the Secretary of State's office on SunBiz the same as a governing agreement? And the answer to that is no. Next slide. The incorporation documents are required to be filed. That would be your articles, but those are the only things that are required to be filed and the only things that are filed. The bylaws and the operating agreement are internal documents and that are generally not disclosed to third parties except in specific situations, such as loans or real estate transactions, when you're going to invite a new investor into your business, that type of thing. Next slide. Reasons why you would want to have a business governing agreement. For one thing, one of the main reasons that you've set up a business entity is to limit your personal liability. And the more that you have the indicia of a business, such as having your bylaws and having your operating agreement, that just increases the personal liability protection. It makes it a little more difficult to pierce the corporate veil because you are operating a business in accordance with Florida law. Another reason, it avoids internal conflict among other business members, and it helps other people do business with your company. Lenders, if you're getting a loan or you're going to have other investors in your business, then they're going to want to see your bylaws or your operating agreement. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Do you need a business operating agreement if it's just one person? Corporations are required to have bylaws by the Florida statutes. Even a single member LLC should have an operating agreement just to, it's just another measure to make sure that you are treated as an LLC and not a sole proprietorship in the eyes of the law. So it is a good idea, and we always recommend that to our clients. Of course, it can be very simple if it's just you. But we often suggest that it's a good idea to lay the groundwork for how your business operates and to give some thought to succession planning. Next slide. Next slide, please. I'm sorry I'm advancing so quickly through the slides, but I put so much information in this presentation and I just want to make sure I cover everything. And so I'm trying to summarize a little bit. As I said before, the only governing agreement that is required are bylaws for a corporation. Next slide. Again, the best practice is to have one for LLCs and partnerships because the Florida statutes create default rules on how these organizations are to be governed, but you may not want that one size fits all. And you may have specific ideas about how you want your business to be run. As I said before, it's important even for a single member LLC to have an operating agreement, but definitely if you have more than one person in your business, you absolutely need to commit this stuff to writing to avoid internal conflicts. Next slide. Definitely, as I just said, put it in writing. And it also helps articulate a common vision for your business. Next slide. Some of the essential provisions that you should have in a governing agreement include things like the organizational information, the ownership and the ownership percentages, management, how is the business going to be managed, record keeping, financial affairs, where you're going to bank, who's going to be responsible for tax issues. You want to deal with amendments. You also want to deal with business succession planning. You want to think about with your business, what happens if you become severely disabled or heaven forbid, pass away? What's going to happen to your business? Do you have people you want to leave your business to? Who's going to run it for them, particularly if they're young children? You want to have some indemnification provisions whereby the business can indemnify either the shareholders or the members against any lawsuits. And then you want to have provisions that deal with the dissolution of the organization. Next slide, please. So in summary, just wanted to mention that it's really important to have these governing documents, and once you set up your business, you need to give some thought to it because it's important to have these things committed to writing. Next slide. The next pitfall that we have is a misclassification of employees versus independent contractors. Next slide. The classification as an employer and independent contractor it impacts, the wages, taxes and withholding, fringe benefits, affects the relationship, scheduling and record keeping. Both employees and independent contractors have different benefits and disadvantages to your business, but it is really important to properly categorize them to avoid unnecessary legal risks and consequences to your business. Next slide. Typically, when someone's an independent contractor, they're a freelancer. And a lot of times they operate it under a registered business name, even though they can be a sole proprietor. They may advertise, they typically own their own tools or equipment needed to complete the job. They may have their own employees. They typically invoice for their services. They set their own hours, have a separate business account, generally have more than one client, and they maintain their own business records. Next slide. Typically, an employee is someone who gets paid for work who is under the direct supervision of someone else, such as office staff, let's say, receptionist. Whereas independent contractors, they take on a particular job for a price, they determine how the work is going to be done, and then they decide if it's necessary to hire others to help them accomplish the work. Next slide. A practice tip here, Florida is an at-will employment state, which means that an employer can let an employee go at any time for any reason, as long as it's not a protected reason, such as race, sex, etc. And the same thing that the employee can also leave at any time. Having an at-will employee provides a lot of flexibility for your business, and a lot of people tend to think when they hire an employee and someone who is an actual employee, such as administrative staff, that they want to enter into a contract with them. And we typically recommend that you don't do that, because you tie yourself down and you lose the flexibility that you have of working in an at-will employment state. But what about contracts with independent contractors? Next slide. And that's where we always say, if you're working with someone who is an independent contractor, you're hiring a contractor to do some work somewhere, you're hiring someone to develop a website for you, those type of people, you always want to have a contract with them. You want all the terms committed to writing. You want to have payment terms, who's liable for what, remedies if the work is performed unsatisfactorily, etc. Next slide. Federal law hasn't created really clear guidance on the difference between an employee and an independent contractor. And so there's no real black or white formula, but an employer is still responsible to get the classification right, or you can definitely pay the consequences. Next slide. Differences for employees and independent contractors, taxes. If you're an employer, you're responsible to withhold federal and state income taxes and pay those taxes to the IRS and the applicable state agencies. If you're hiring an independent contractor, they're responsible for their own withholding. And the IRS can definitely penalize employers that misclassify employees and independent contractors. Next slide. Social Security and unemployment insurance is another thing that's required to be withheld from an employee. An independent contractor would pay those things themselves. Next slide. Employees typically would get healthcare and retirement benefits, assuming that those are offered or required to be offered by the employer. But for a small business, those usually aren't required. Next slide. This is just a list of other required benefits, but again, this depends on business size. So if you're just starting out, these are typically things that you don't have to worry about. Next slide, please. The problem is caused if you incorrectly classify an employee versus an independent contractor. You could be required to reimburse the employee, the person that you improperly classified, for overtime and minimum wage. You would have to pay back taxes and penalties for failure to withhold. Then you may be required to pay back fringe benefits if required. There can be a number of penalties if it was determined that the misclassification was done on purpose. If they are truly an employee and not an independent contractor, then the employer can be held liable for their own negligence if they were acting within the scope of their employment. And then, as an employer, you have a duty to maintain a safe work environment. So there's a number of issues that can arise if you're improperly classifying people. Next slide. Generally, an employer or someone that hires an independent contractor is not liable for the negligence of the independent contractor, but as always, there are exceptions. One practice tip is even if you have hired an independent contractor and they have their own insurance, you always want to make sure that you have sufficient insurance yourself, just in case, to protect your business. Next slide. The question is, what if I have the hire sign a contract stating that they're an independent contractor? And the answer to that is someone does not become an independent contractor simply because you classify them as such. An independent contractor needs to walk and talk like an independent contractor, not an employee. And we see that a lot. People, for instance, they need a receptionist or an administrative assistant, but they don't want to pay all of the taxes and everything. So they say, oh, you're an independent contractor. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And you can wind up with some severe penalties for doing something like that. Typically, a way that this happens or it comes to light is whenever you let this supposed independent contractor go for whatever reason, then they go and file for unemployment. And then the whole situation gets brought out into the open. And now the state of Florida realizes that you really should have been paying, unemployment tax for them. They really were an employee. And now you've got yourself in a fine mess. Next slide, please. So the takeaway for this is it's very important to properly categorize your workers because of tax and liability implications. It's tempting to categorize everyone as an independent contractor because of the tax savings, but there can be serious penalties. So make sure you consult with your tax or legal professional. Next slide, please. Next slide. Lastly, the last pitfall that I want to discuss is failure to properly navigate sales and use tax in Florida. Next slide. Nothing in life is certain except death and taxes. Next slide. So this is a list of some taxable business activities. So before you go into business, you need to determine whether or not the services that you provide are subject to Florida sales tax, for instance. Next slide, please. If they are, then you can register with the Florida Department of Revenue, and they have a very easy to, I think relatively easy to navigate website with a lot of information about the various taxes that could be required, and they make it pretty easy to register and pay taxes. Next slide. Next slide, please. I think I've already mentioned that it's the Florida Department of Revenue that administers the tax laws. And then in addition to sales tax, other things that you need to be aware of are local business taxes or occupational license taxes, building permits, building inspections that may be required before you open your business, planning and zoning, and also be aware of community and economic development opportunities, such as those that have been discussed here today through Broward County. Next slide. So this is what the business tax application would look like from the website. And as I said, it's fairly easy to navigate this. Next slide. Next slide. So in general, Florida's sales tax is 6%, but there are some exceptions on, the lease of commercial real property. A different rate applies for electricity, amusement, machine receipts. But you do have to keep in mind that there are local option surtaxes as well. Like for instance, in Miami-Dade and Broward County, the local sales tax is 7%. But if you go up to Leon County in Tallahassee, their sales tax rate is 7.5%. So if you're selling to people located in different counties in Florida, you need to be aware of that, and you need to be collecting tax appropriately. Next slide. Also, sales tax could be due on out-of-state sales. It used to be that online vendors didn't have to pay sales taxes except on the state where they maybe were actually located and had a physical presence. But now there was a relatively recent in 2018 United States Supreme Court decision, and now almost all states require the collection and remittance of sales tax. There are only about 6 states now, last check that I did, that don't require it, and those are, they include Alaska and Montana. But that is something, if you are if you do a lot of out-of-state sales, or you have an online business, or you've got an Amazon business, you really need to keep abreast of this as more and more states jump on the bandwagon. Most states require marketplace facilitators, such as Amazon, to collect the tax for the vendor. So if you are an Amazon seller, Amazon is basically going to do all of this for you. But if you do things on the side, not through Amazon or a marketplace facilitator, then you need to be aware of these things. And then effective July 1st, Florida became one of those states that require the collection of taxes through the marketplace facilitators. Next slide. So this is the end of my presentation. I hope I didn't go too fast for everyone trying to stay within my time, but this is the contact information for our office. I'll read it out to you. The telephone number is 754-312-3353, and that's the number for our intake paralegal. Her email address is sdespointes, that's SDESPOINTES @legalaid.org. And you can call that number or email to apply for services, and she will do intake and collect the information that you need to see if you apply for our free legal services. Thank you very much.
Wendy, we want to thank you for sharing that information, and that was very helpful information. And I'm going to recap 2 pieces. All of it's extremely important. The 2 things she stated that reminds me of some of the paperwork on my desk. Employees versus independent contractors. We in the industry love to say that word, 1099s. We recognize some of my small businesses, some of you in my audience, when attempting to get the PPP, you were trying to use 1099 as your employees. You couldn't. When taking a look at my CARES grant and identifying employees, you were trying to write down 1099 or so-called freelancers or so-called independent contractors as yours. They weren't. My certification application tells you to give us the number of employees you have, not subcontractors, not consultants, employees. County bids, some will ask you about your labor force, and they speak specifically to W-2 employees, and some do afford you the chance. You get a larger contract to also go sub some of the additional work. So please pay attention to the difference between your employees and these independent contractors. And the second thing that shocked me but didn't shock me, and I've been in Broward 8 years now, and unfortunately, I don't want to just beat up on Broward and Fort Lauderdale, or it happened in Michigan. It happened when I was in DC. So I'm still trying to figure out why my small businesses win contracts as subcontractors, and you don't sign a contract. I had small businesses when I first got here, and only a few now, who are winning contracts, completing our LOIs. They're being used for 10, 20, or 30% of that goal, and you don't sign a contract with the prime, we need you to sign a contract. You heard Wendy simply say, if you got a contract, you need to have a contract. So even though the prime has a contract with the county to do the roof at the Bark facility, and we placed a 30% goal, this prime has to use a small business or multiple small businesses to meet the goal. They have to follow our program. But as a business, you need a contract with that prime contractor. The prime contractor knows it. So I need to make sure you as a small business know you need a contract. So at the end of the day, thank you again, Wendy. That was very helpful information, as well as contact information to get more. So again, if you have questions, we've been answering some of them. Put your questions in the Q&A. Sandy Steed is still around to answer those. We're going to ask Wendy to answer those. We will take questions at the end for those that might be available. But now we're going to introduce you to Lisa Colon. Here's the thing about Lisa and a portion of her presentation. It is about how you start. If you are a small business, if you desire to be a business, if you're an entrepreneur with an idea and you're going to launch a business, it really is about your start. And this is probably going to focus a little bit more about if you're that small business and that industry happens to be construction, some more devil in the detail. But the bottom line, folks, if you're going to be a business, there's things you need to do to present yourself as a business. So Lisa, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
My pleasure, and thank you to my co-presenters, Ms. Steed and Ms. Wilson. It's a pleasure to be on a panel with you guys. My name is Lisa Colon. I'm a partner at Saul Ewing, Arnstein and Lair in Fort Lauderdale. I have 22 years of practice in the construction legal industry. I've been a construction lawyer. I represent a lot of contractors and developers building great projects all around Broward County and throughout the state. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about some contracting mistakes to avoid, but like Sandy said, we're going to start from the beginning. So if you are a small business and you want to do business with Broward County, Broward County is obviously a public owner, a public entity, and procurement laws govern how they are to give out contracts, right? Unlike the private entity where you can enter into a contract with a contractor or an owner to do something to provide a service to someone. If you're doing business with the county, you have to go through the procurement process, and going through that procurement process, you have to know where to go look for the work, right? I believe Broward County, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Broward County uses BidSync. All of the items that the county purchases, all of the services that the county purchases, all of the construction that the county does has to all be procured. Most of it has to be procured publicly, and all of that work is published on the county's website. Next slide. Okay, so bidding, right? What's bidding? So if you are a small business and you want to do work with the county, you have to know how to put together a bid. Okay, that's the number one thing. So you're going to go on the county's website or go on BidSync, and you're going to see something advertised that looks like you can do, right? So whether it is selling the county office furniture or providing the county some kind of service, or constructing something for the county, doing renovations, janitorial services, whatever it is, you're going to have to know how to put together a bid to go after that work. And when you put together the bid, you're also going to have to try and put together a bid that's competitive. You're going to have to know what kind of bid you're going after, right? So a bid is typically given in response to some sort of solicitation issued by the owner, in this case, Broward County. I did put on there the slide. I'm sorry, it's so tiny, but it is bidsync.com. And a bid is offered to provide all labor, materials, services, equipment, defining the scope of work in exchange for payment of the bid amount. All right, so that's basically what a bid is. They put all the information, depending, again, the type of work you're going after, all of the information that the county wants to buy is going to be in what they call the solicitation. Next slide. So like I said, you're going to have to understand how to put together a bid. Now, if you do work, like you provide a service, you're going to have to calculate, the number of hours or any other type of materials that you need to provide that service. And you're going to have to be able to put that together in a competitive pricing way so that you can be responsive and perhaps the lowest bidder, if that's the type of bid you're going after, so that you can get the work, right? So bid estimating is a huge deal, and it's a science, right? There's no one to teach you how to really bid estimate. You need to understand, you have to understand the work, you have to understand the bid, you have to understand the pricing, you have to understand what other folks in your industry are doing in order to be competitive. Like Sandy said, I'm mostly in construction, so obviously my experience is dealing with construction contractors and in putting together their bids and in their solicitation and guiding them if there is an issue with the bid. And in construction, obviously, you have to do quantity takeoffs. You have to understand the amount of concrete and drywall and paint and everything else that you're going to need to do that project. You may have to rely, if you are bidding on a project, that you're going to use some subcontractors. Perhaps you're going to act as the prime contractor if you're the one entering into the contract with the county. So just so you understand the hierarchy, you enter into a contract with the county, you are the prime, right? And that's not only in construction. You're going to hear that word, prime contractor. You are the prime contractor when you have a direct contract with the county. That means you're in the legal word we use is being in privity with the county. And so sometimes some of your work, usually it's in construction, but in providing other services too, you may need to engage subcontractors. So you're going to have to get your subcontractors together, get your bids together on time in order to put together that bid. So make sure that putting together a bid is so important, because that's how you're going to win the work. A lot of clients, especially my small business clients, get very, very frustrated at this part, because they often say, well, I have the CBE certification and I'm a CBE and I'm not getting any work. Well, you're not, that's a misnomer that you're not getting any work, because nobody can give you work. The county, just because you're a CBE, the county can't just say, hey, company X, Y, and Z, here's a contract. That's not how it works. The county is obligated under law for certain type of contracts over a certain dollar amount. They have to publicly procure it. It's a competition. So therefore, you have to know how to put together a bid to be competitive. It's literally a competition. So you have to know how to estimate, know how to get the lowest prices from your vendors. You need to know how to calculate the time that's going to take to do the project, and how your general conditions are going to reflect in that time. So the time, the personnel, the benefits, the miscellaneous things like the trailers and the phones and anything else you may need for the project, all has to go into your bid. All of that has to be part of your pricing, because that's how your business is going to survive, right? You have to make sure that you're accounting for all of that, all of your costs, right? Also insurance. You must have insurance to be a business, to be certified, right? That's part of your certification package. If you are CBE, you need insurance to do business. Everybody needs commercial general liability insurance. Most people need workers' comp unless there's an exemption. Automobile insurance if you have company cars. So all of these things also come with a price that should be assessed to, although you buy it yearly, it should be assessed as part of the bid. And then there's bonding. If you are doing construction work over a certain dollar value, you're going to be required to have a bond. I'm not going to get into bonding because I give lectures and we can spend a whole hour and a half just talking about bonding and how that whole process works. But you have to, one thing I would say to this group is that if you are a new business and if you are doing construction, one of the most important things that you can do to help yourself in the beginning is ensure that you have a great CPA. I'll say a great lawyer too, because I'm biased, but you really need, before the lawyer, you really, really need a great CPA. And if you're doing construction work, you should get a CPA that has experience in helping you put together your financial statements and your taxes in a way that you can eventually get bonding. Because how you build bonding capacity is you do work, you get work, and as you do work, your projects get bigger. So you may start off with a $500,000 project, and then, you know, in a year or two, you're going after $2 million projects, and in a year or two, you know, you're going after $5 million projects. Well, you need to make sure that you're showing that capacity, that financial capacity in your accounts, so that you can eventually apply to a surety to get a bond. And again, I could go on forever about bonding, but that's it's so important, especially in construction. Taxes, obviously you have to calculate your tax burden that has to go into your bid, and any kind of special risks and assessments that are particular to the type of work or service that you provide. Next slide. You also have to understand the type of bid that you're going after. Is it a request for a proposal? Is it a request for information? Is it a request for qualifications? Is it a low bid? Is it a best value bid? Is it a bid if you're an architect or an engineer? Is it procured pursuant to the CCNA, which is the Consultants Competitive anyway, forgot what the acronym stands for, but it's basically the way that the county has to procure services, legal services, architectural services, surveying services, and stuff like that. So you have to understand the type of bid you're going after. Not every bid that's out there that you're going to see is for the lowest price, right? Now, usually most bids are for just the lowest and best price, but that's certainly not, that's not the be all and end all. You can have bids that are for negotiation. They want the best value. So the county will choose and rank the bidders based upon their proposal. And then you have to do it step two of negotiations with the county, put on presentations. So you have to really understand the type of bid you're going after. Next slide. And then the bid submission process. Obviously, if it's a private bid, you're just going to touch on it. It's flexible. Sometimes owners will accept bids from 3 or more companies. If you're a roofer, it's often in this market, it's very, very common that roofers, the owner wants three bids. If you're doing condominium work, the law requires that a condominium association, when they are going to do some type of work, have to get 3 bids. So understand that you're always in competition with someone for your services, depending on the type of owner that you are engaging with. The public bid, of course, it's a submission. They're complex statutory rules and regulations. This is put in so that the public can get work. This is taxpayers' dollars, so it's to foster fairness in the system, to protect potential favoritism, and usually is to get the best value or the lowest bid for the county. Next. So once you identify the bid, once you identify the solicitation that you're going after, you're going to put together your bid. You're going to make sure your bid is competitive, and you've estimated, and you've done all your homework, and you're ready to put that together. Make sure you give yourself enough time. I can tell you with my construction contracts, bid day is the day that you're not going to find anyone on the phone or email. They're all frantically taking subcontractor bids and putting it together and getting their last final quotes from their vendors and their material supplies and their equipment leases and so forth. So make sure that you give yourself enough time. If you go on, I think I saw Periscope. If you go on Periscope or BidSync or whatever, thank you, Sandy. It's the Consultant Competitive Negotiation Act. I don't know why I had a little bit of a brain fart there. But if you're going to put together a bid, just know that this is not something that you generally can do in a few hours, or just if you see a bid, if you get on the website today and you see something due tomorrow, depending on the complexity of the work, it's not something you can just generally throw together. So you have to make sure you give yourself enough time. Again, this is a competition, just like any competition. If you've ever been in an athlete or competitive dancer or singer or anything, you have to prepare. And preparation is knowing the type of work that you want to go after, looking for that type of work, and being sure that you're giving yourself enough time to properly answer the solicitation. So one of the first things that the county is going to do when they open the bid, the staff is going to look for what they call responsiveness, right? Did you properly respond to the bid? Now, please understand, this is a check the list type of situation, right? So if there are, in any solicitation, there are going to be types of forms that you need to fill out, information that you need to provide. So for example, in construction, or if you're providing some kind of services, you're going to need to provide your license. You're going to need to provide a copy of your insurance. You're going to need to provide perhaps some financial information. Whatever the forms require you to do, make sure that you fill out every single form. Make sure that you sign everywhere that you're expected to sign. And make sure that you notarize anything that needs to be notarized. Do not make any changes. Don't scratch out anything. Don't add any qualifications to the bid. If the bid asks for quantity X of a certain value or type of material or widget, don't say that I could provide quantity Y, which is bigger and a better product. Don't do that, right? You need to fill in all the blanks, submit all the forms. And the most important thing, if it's at Friday at 3 p.m. where the bid is due, you need to make sure that it's in on Friday at 3 p.m. in the format and in the quantity and the amount of copies on the type of way the county wants the bid. If you do not do any of those things, then you will be deemed non-responsive, and all of that work that you've done is going to go out the window, right? Your bid is not going to be considered. Okay, so again, this is a checklist type of situation. Once you get the bid, I suggest that you go through all the forms, make a photocopy of print them out several times if they're online, you're doing it online. I'm old school, I like paper to just ensure that I have everything, but just make yourself a checklist. Say, did I sign the non-collusion affidavit? Did I sign this? Did I sign that? Just make sure that you understand all the forms that need to be signed and that you're submitting everything. Next slide. I'm going to move faster. Okay, then there's this idea and this concept called responsibility, right? So sometimes the solicitation is going to ask you to list all your management, your technical, your technical capacity and capability, how you're going to meet the safety requirements. Sometimes it's going to ask for references. And part of evaluating your bid, depending on the bid type, again, bid type is very important. You need to know how you're going to be judged. Just like any competition, you need to know the point system. You need to know if it's a low bid, then I want to come in as a low bid. If they're going to rank, I need to know, how I can get as many points so I can have a 100 score. Okay, so you have to prepare for competition. Next slide. Okay, and just finally, public bid disputes. I just want to just briefly mention that there are some times where your competitor will find something wrong with your bid and they will dispute your bid. And that's a very expensive and time-consuming process. Right? So you don't want to get in a public bid dispute. Some of the hot areas for public bid disputes for smaller companies is usually a certification. If you are required to have for example, if you're required to have an office in Broward County to be a CBE and your competition knows that you don't have an office and you're really in Miami-Dade County or, you're across the state and they say, well, I'm going to protest your bid because you're not really a CBE and you got your CBE certification by fooling the county, then now you're in the bid protest. And I can tell you it takes, one, you've now wasted your time because if you put together a bid, you spent money doing that and the protester is correct, you've wasted time and energy. Some bigger types of bid protests can involve lawyers frantically working under very tight deadlines, because the bid protest statutes usually require a response within 72 hours or less than 5 days. So the lawyers are working endlessly and tiredly overnight to put together their responses. So you know, depending on your type of bid, you want to just make sure that you've done everything that you need to do so that you're not subject to a protest. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to go through contracts, right? So now you've gotten the work, and you have your contract with the county. Now, let's just say this: if you are the prime contractor with the county, you're going to be required at bid to accept the contractual terms, right? There are some exceptions to that, very few. And that's probably more for a later discussion, but just know that as a general principle, at bid solicitation, you're going to be required to look through the terms. Usually the contract that the county wants you to enter into is going to be attached to the bid solicitation and be part of the bid documents. And once you submit a bid, you're going to be agreeing to that. Right? I'm going to go through some concepts, and I want you to just be aware, even if you're not negotiating the contract, that these are certain terms that you need to be aware of. Now, if you're acting as a subcontractor for a prime, then you have perhaps a little bit more opportunity to negotiate some of these terms with the prime contractor. Sometimes you have the leverage, sometimes you don't. It's all part of the game, but I just want you to be aware of where some of the pitfalls are in your contracts, right? So your contract is generally, it tells you the most important things a contract should say. What's the scope of the work? What's the time to perform? What is the compensation? What are your duties and rights and obligations? And what are your remedies if something goes wrong, right? All good contracts have at least those bones. Okay, next slide. All right, so, you know, on complicated projects, especially in construction, just real quick, construction contracts are usually hundreds of pages long and have hundreds of documents that are part of the contract documents. They have the agreement, they have the general conditions, which is tells you the rights and the duties of the parties. So in the agreement, it tells you the scope and the price and how to do certain things and what's the owner's obligations and what's the contractor's obligations. And then the general conditions will take that and go into it deeper. What happens if you are in a construction project and you come across an unforeseen condition that you didn't price for? You know, how do you do a change order? What if you want to terminate the contract? So generally, that's what's in your general conditions in terms of a contract document. Now that word general conditions also has another meaning in construction, which is really your overhead costs, and you know, so just note that when I say general conditions, I'm actually talking about a contractual document. Then you have a supplementary or a special conditions that may be particular to a project, dealing with things that are specific to that project. You have your plans and your drawings, you have your specifications, and you have your schedule. So all of these things make up a contract. Why is this important? If you are the subcontractor on a project and your subcontract with the prime may be a very, very simple agreement. As a matter of fact, in 22 years of doing this type of work, I have seen all types of agreements, including no written agreements, which I do not recommend. I don't care what you're selling. I don't care what type of work you're doing. I don't care what you're procuring, who you're doing business with. You should always have a written agreement. I can't stress that enough. And as simple as it may seem, as simple as that concept may seem, and as obvious as it may seem, I can tell you, I have seen handshake deals on some big projects with subcontractors, with some sophisticated people working. So just because, you know, it may seem like, you know, we joke about it, oh, did they have a contract? Let me tell you, people do work all the time on a handshake, and it just never works out because no one really, everyone has a different concept of what they believe that they entered into. Okay, next slide. So what I wanted to say on why those things are important, why the contract documents are important. As a subcontractor, you may have a very simple agreement with your prime, right? And that prime, however, has a very complicated agreement with the county or the owner, right? You have to understand whether or not your subcontract, that's that simple 2-pager contract, incorporates any of the documents that's in that prime contract. Because if it has language, which it usually does, and if you're working with very big, sophisticated prime contractors, building sophisticated projects, your subcontract is going to have a clause that incorporates all the prime contract documents between the prime and the owner into your subcontract. And it's also going to tell you if there are conflicting provisions, which contract rules. You need to understand that, because you cannot just you cannot take for granted that you have a subcontract, it's 2 pages, 3 pages long. Oh, you're just providing, you know, a few square feet of concrete, no big deal. Well, you have to know that even if that's the case, is the prime making you take on all of the liability in the prime contract? And that's something that you should be negotiating it. The amount of work that you're doing as a subcontractor or a small business should be fair, and the amount of risk you're taking on should be fair. Okay. Again, I'm listing here some of the key contract provisions, and I just don't know how I'm doing with time. So let me see. Okay, I think I'm doing okay.
You're doing good. Keep it going.
Okay, great. So some of the key contract provisions. Now I've listed these 6 here because this is what keeps me in business, right? These form the basis of every dispute, or most of the disputes on a contract, right? So the scope of work. It may seem very, very simple, right? The scope of work. What am I hired to do? What am I providing to the contractor or to the owner? Well, a lot of times, sometimes the documents are not fully developed. Sometimes the documents, when I say documents, the drawings, sometimes the solicitation even could be a little vague or unclear, and you've bidded based upon unclear solicitation, something that you really didn't fully understand when you submitted your bid. And now you're doing what you're supposed to do, an issue comes up and you realize, oh, that's not in my scope of work. So it's very important to understand what your scope of work is. A lot of the times I see contractors or folks doing business with the county put together very detailed proposals, and somehow that proposal everything in that proposal does not always end up in the contract that's signed, or that proposal is a document or adopted as part of the contract, and there's conflicting terms. And then if there's conflicting terms, if the subcontract agreement in itself says you're supposed to provide X, but the proposal that you gave to the contractor says I'm excluding that from my scope of work, then what do you do? Right now, there's law that figures that out, but you don't want to get there, right? You don't want to have to unravel that type of situation. Time, schedule, obviously the number one thing in construction. We're always, budget and schedule. So you have to understand what schedule, what time frame you're supposed to provide your services. And again, this is not only construction, this is any contract. Every contract, depending on what the services you're providing, is going to tie you to a time frame to complete your work. Payment. That's the reason why you're here. You want to get paid. That's the reason why we're in business. You have to understand payment clauses can be very simple, as you'll get paid every 2 weeks, just submit an invoice, and it could be a very complicated process. If you're in a big construction project, a payment provision can be a whole page long, with qualifications and types of documents you're supposed to provide with your invoice and your payment, or a particular type of what they call payment application that you're supposed to use, and a schedule of values. And if this is all new to you and you've not done the administrative side of your work, it could be very confusing. So I would suggest that you really pay attention to your payment provision. Another thing I want to mention in payment provision, a very common payment provision for subcontractors need to be aware of in the construction industry is what we call a paid if paid clause, or pay when paid clause. And it's a difference with a distinction. But be very aware that these clauses basically say the prime contractor is not going to pay you until they get paid from the owner. Right? So if there is a dispute with the owner over anything, depending on how the phrase is, the term is written in your subcontract, you can get hung up in a payment dispute between the owner and the prime contractor, right? So you want to make sure, the first thing I say to subcontractor clients or small business clients is try to negotiate that payment term out. So one of the ways you can do it, and of course, it's going to be very project specific, and it's going to be very contractor specific. Some bigger contractors are better at understanding this than others. If you're a very small business, you go to your whoever your contract administrator, or whoever you're negotiating with, the project manager, whoever's helping you put together your subcontract, and say, hey, I'm a small business. I cannot take on this risk. You know, one late payment application, one late payment, one late invoice will literally sink my business, right? Can we negotiate this out? And depending on your scope of work and depending on who you're talking to, you have a shot. It could be a slim shot. In this market in South Florida, I'll tell you, it's a tough negotiating point, but I've done it. And I've helped subcontractors get out of that pay when paid clause. You don't want it shifts all the payment risk to you. You can be sitting there as a small business and be out 60, 90. What would being out $100,000 180 days do to your business? Right? It's going to be very harmful. All right, my time is up and I have one slide left. Let's go to the slide. Okay, again, all of these things are very important. Contract provisions, incorporation by reference, indemnity, insurance, warranty, completion, termination, dispute resolution. These are things that you should be aware of that's in your contract, and understand, especially insurance. Indemnity, very, very important. Indemnity basically says that you are going to pay the, if you're a subcontractor or if you are the prime, you're going to pay the owner. If you're a sub, you're going to pay the contractor and the owner for anything that you cause, any negligence of yours that cause any damage to any third person or property on the project. So you have to make sure, one of the things that I want you to, before we leave, take away is that if you have an indemnification clause, sit with your insurance agent. CPA, number one, insurance agent that understands your business. Number two, make sure that you have insurance, sufficient insurance coverage to cover your indemnity clauses and all the risk in your contract. And then lawyer. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Lisa, we want to thank you very much. And weren't rushing you there because we're certainly going to get to questions, but your information, as well as the other two speakers, were so valuable. And she said it again at the end, but I jotted it down early. If you are a small business, seriously, you need a great CPA. But I think based on what Lisa also told you, I don't want to undertone it. You need a great lawyer. Folks, at the end of the day, and this was a part of one of the questions, again, I'm government, and I'm clear. I say this in our entrepreneurship workshops. I will not tell you what business to start. I won't tell you where to spend your money. I won't tell you how to get incorporated, S Corp, C Corp, LLC. We share information about our program, what your opportunities are, and where there's resources like people like Lisa and Wendy and others who work with small businesses, prime contractors and others. As government, I can't advise you because we know the truth. Tell the truth, shame the devil. I advise you to do something. I tell you to pivot, go start this business, put your money in, invest your money. As soon as you don't win a contract, as soon as you lose money, as soon as it's not working, you want to sue the county because I advise you to do X. I can't advise you. But we put resources and people and information in front of you. Because at the end of the day, you have chosen to go into business. And the other thing I remind all of our businesses, is that you're a small business, so take advantage of that, our Business Opportunity Act, take advantage of our program, take advantage of the county's commitment to make sure that at least 25% of what we buy, we try to buy from certified small businesses. We recognize that 90%, it's 89 and some change, but I'm just going to round it up. 90% of all the businesses in Broward County, and we have over 80,000 businesses in Broward, 90% of them are small by 20 employees or less. The SBA calls small 1 to 500 employees. We recognize that over 89%, 90% of ours have 20 employees or less. So we are a small business community, which is why the county is committed to our small business program, which is why you can use our certification to be a small business engaging in county procurement. But once you win a contract, I expect you to do business. You should expect to do business. The county expects you to do business. And that prime contractor, though he utilized you to meet the certification requirements to reach the goal, he or she is actually looking at you as a business. So I often remind our small businesses, use the program and the opportunity to receive the opportunity to show who you are and what you do. But when you win that contract, when you're that prime contractor, when you're that sub, when you're working, you have to just simply do business. Don't even look at yourself as small. Look at yourself as a business. So that was extremely important. And the other part that I liked, though I liked a lot what Lisa said, if not all she said, I just wanted to say another part I want to remind you. She's spot on. Do not wait. If the bids are due at 5 p.m., don't wait till 3 o'clock. So you say, Mr. McDonald, that's 2 hours. The bids due at 5. Do not wait till 3 o'clock. Especially if you haven't navigated Periscope 2, which is the former BidSync, which is our procurement system. Lisa was correct. Folks, put that bid in as soon as you can. Somebody say, do you think I should put it in a day early? If you prepared and you're done, put it in the system. Don't wait till the last day if you don't have to. And certainly don't wait till that last hour, that last 2 hours, because we want to be clear. The solicitation told you. We don't know about that thing called technical glitch. So don't be talking about, I was trying to submit it and then my computer went down. I was trying to submit it and then that act of God with that lightning. Folks, do not wait to the last day to submit a bid in government. Our recommendation is outside of the pleas, outside of the justification, don't do it. That was real, and I appreciate Lisa sharing that. So here we go. Pam, tell me if there's any other questions we need to answer as an audience. If some popped up for Lisa while she was presenting, and I saw Wendy and Sandy took care of some earlier, I took care of some. But if we have any that we want to address openly, we certainly have time to do so.
Thank you, Sandy. Good afternoon. We had a question that came up that you gave a brief answer to, and Wendy has also, but I think it's certainly worth putting out there to everybody. The question was from A. Whitney Shea, and it's about independent contractors. And she says, hi, I'm hoping I'm in the right place. I'm a military spouse, Florida resident, currently stationed abroad, but have a virtual therapy practice serving clients in Florida, among other states. Maybe this is a wrong spot, but I was hoping to get some guidance about legal ramifications of having independent contractors licensed in different states. It's kind of a complicated question, but Wendy did give her a bit of a written response, and I will say that, and then if anybody wants to add to it. Wendy's response to her is, this is a complicated question. I think if you're asking if a contractor is licensed in another state, can they be hired to do work in Florida? Well, generally, if Florida requires a license for the work, then the IC would need to be licensed in Florida, unless there's some sort of reciprocity or they give special dispensation to a military spouse. Is there anything else anybody would want to add?
Lisa or Sandy, anything you want to add? I'll give my 2 cents. And in case I read it wrong, because I did read that earlier, or I heard it wrong. If you're operating your virtual therapy sessions and you're looking to hire folks that's willing to follow your program and to operate in different states, one, to Pam Danberg's and Wendy's answer, you have to make sure that anyone providing a service, and not just Florida, any state, that they are licensed for that service if there's a license requirement in that state. You as a business, think about it as an enterprise perspective. I have tons of businesses. I have tons of my DBEs, my disadvantaged business enterprise, who are doing businesses in multiple states. And they're allowed to do businesses in multiple states because they're following all the regulations and their certifications in each state to do that business. They're not just automatically granted the reciprocity. Because I do business in Florida, I'm automatically accepted in 19 other states. No, you're not. There's things that you have to do in each one of those states, even if you wanted to expand your office to be in multiple states. So if I was hearing the part of the question about where you are and what you wanted to do in other states with your independent contractors as a company, you're still going to establish yourself somewhere. And if these are your independent contractors operating under you, wherever you are, they can really only operate based on your services if they have the licenses in those states to operate. Now, how you do your taxes and all the other stuff, I'm going back to Lisa. You need a good CPA to explain as a company, as a business, how all of this, because the other twist that you added to all of this, you threw me off, not threw me off, you threw me with the twist that is virtual. The services, not just yours, you also, I think, made it sound like even the services they're going to provide for you in other states is virtual. So that's my little 2 cents. And if that didn't help, by all means, staff will put my email back up. Send me an email if you can offer more clarity, and we will take the time to research that.
I'd like to add, Sandy, that she should contact whoever administers her license, so that licensing board. I know that in many professions, this whole idea of virtual working, remote working, has raised a lot of ethical issues and licensing issues in many industries, including mine, as to whether or not I can practice law in Florida while I go hang with my folks in New York and for the rest of the year. So there's lots of, all these licensing boards have issued rules and are giving guidance to folks who are operating virtually and doing remote work, with the idea in mind that this is the future, that people are not going to, perhaps a lot of professions are not going to have a brick and mortar office anymore.
Yeah, understandable. Ms. Steve, anything you want to offer?
I agree with Ms. Falone. She definitely gave some good advice there. I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Ms. Danberg? Any other questions?
Thank you. I have a correct. This goes to you, Sandy. It's a question from Caretha Hicks. Because it came in last minute, didn't have a quick chance to type her an answer, but I'll let you answer. So she says, what if I don't have 3 years in my business? Asking because certification is asking for 3 years taxes. Is that a qualification to be certified with Broward?
So it's my original ask about the 3, but my certification is for you to demonstrate that there's at least 1 year that you have an operating presence in Broward. So that means the 1 year is the operating presence. To demonstrate any tax activity, that means you already took me at least to 2 years. We have received applications where individuals have been operating for 2 years. They're able to demonstrate that they have an operating presence right here in Broward County for those 2 years. They filed that business tax at least a year. And again, that's enough for us to get started. The taxes is about helping us for the certification process, make the determination that you meet the minimum criteria for our gross receipts. See, so at the end of the day, we definitely want to get you to the 3 years. But if your business really is only 1 year old or 2 years old and you've officially done your taxes, that taxes is going to tell me what you actually have made in terms of average. Our program is averaging for gross receipts for most industry, $5 million or less over 3 years. And in construction, $9 million or less over 3 years. So yes, we would prefer to have on the onset 3 years of taxes because the average helps us to determine where you fit. We certainly need to have at least 1 year. So if you are one of those businesses, and I had some last year, who, hey, I just made my year, Mr. McDonald, and the truth is, they had just made their year and they had done absolutely no business here or nowhere else, then you have no taxes you've done yet. So then no, you're on pause in terms of being able to complete my certification application because you have no taxes to demonstrate. So in regards to the 3 years, the 3 years of taxes helps us, and it's an automatic, and it is a must on any renewal, but it does not prohibit you from submitting your application in terms of at least meeting a 2-year criteria with 1 year of taxes that you have.
All right, thank you, Sandy. We have a question from Athena. It's going back to the ordinance, and I'm going to actually allow Athena to talk and ask her question. So I'm going to ask her to unmute right now. Whoops. There we go. And in the meantime, I just want you to see that we have put up, while we're doing our question and answer, we've also put up our customer satisfaction survey poll. If all y'all would take a minute to answer these questions, this really gives us valuable feedback so that we can better serve you. It will be up for a while. It's all online. It only takes about a couple minutes. In the meantime, I'm sorry, Athena, go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for hearing from me. I did have a question about ordinance. I am in the motorcycle business. We do restoration and custom builds and sometimes do some repair. We've been off to a crazy start between hurricanes and pandemics and have really never gotten off the ground running. And we did apply for our business tax receipt, and we've had that and our city license and our Department of Agriculture license for the last 2 years. We had Broward County come in and say that we fit under an auto repair license, and the criteria is to have a certified technician. There is nowhere to certify a motorcycle technician, so I was told by the county coordinators to disregard that portion of the ordinance and just pay the fees and get the license until they could rewrite the ordinance. I am in my last semester of my paralegal degree, which I started 17 years ago, but my parents got sick. I stayed home, took care of them, did all the things I was supposed to do, raised my kids. I've been a responsible member of the community here in Broward. I'm 52. I've been here since I was 4. I'm confused because there's nowhere to be certified. So what I've done is I've started a nonprofit organization, and I'm putting together a board of professionals to actually certify technicians, because it is a safety concern for those of us who care about the fact that we can hurt somebody if we don't do quality work, and care about our, our fellow man and common community, people. It cuts down on the people on the side of the road getting hit by cars when the bikes break down, people having motorcycle failure and getting hit or hurt or crashing. So my question is, though, we were getting ready to restart after this pandemic, and we got hit with this, and I don't understand how do I go about this? Like, it doesn't make sense to me to go ahead and participate with this. However, in order to do business in Broward County, I have to. So they're telling me disregard and just pay as a trainee, but the ordinance says that the trainees have 2 trainees have to work under a certified technician. They say the auto individuals get trained by ASE, which is the Automotive Service Excellence Committee. I understand that. Again, I've spent the last 3 months working on a professional board and putting together a nonprofit to go ahead and address this situation. However, what do I do to get my business back up and running? Because I've been closed for almost 1.5 years and really didn't have a lot going before that. I was working in a restaurant just to pay my overhead because we had hurricane after hurricane after just restarting. it gets to be a bit monotonous, but now I have people calling and wanting to start to do business. And I have my business tax receipt. I have my Department of Agriculture from the state of Florida. I have my city receipt. Where do I go? What do I do? I mean, where can I find out the information when they're going to rewrite this ordinance? Because I don't really have to participate until the ordinance is written to meet the criteria, correct? I'm so confused, and I don't know, is there somewhere I can ask somebody for help with this? I did have a Zoom meeting with everyone, like 4 individuals from the departments, but it left me just with more questions. So I don't know what to do. I thought this would help explain some of that. I got some answers about business, which I'm greatly appreciative of. You answered a lot of questions that I would like to know about getting involved with fixing the motorcycles in the county and stuff, but I'd like to get back to business. So I don't know, who do I contact about that?
So let's do it this way, because you're right. Unfortunately, this isn't the group that can give you that answer, but I will not pass you off. I would like for you to send me an email directly.
Okay.
And then if you even have the name of the folks you were on with the Zoom, so give me as much information as you want in the email. And then I will get in touch with that department or that division specifically. And I'll speak to this conversation we're having now. I'll speak specifically to what you write, and we'll try to drill down on exactly what does it take from the county to get you open. That's the key thing. And then even as you move forward with your nonprofit and you decide that you want to put that organization together from a state perspective to continue, that's great. But your question from us, what gets you open with the county is what I'll focus on.
But I need to be open and doing business. I mean, we're starving. We're
gotcha. So send me the email, and that's what I'll focus on. As last mentioned, how do we get your business open? And that's why tell me as much as you can in the email, including if you remember any of the names in that department or division. So then I can get with that division head.
Okay. All right. And then, and again, part of my participation was because I saw Miss Steed there from the county attorney's office, because I did have that question. The ordinance, they told me just wait, they will rewrite the ordinance and just buy the license for now. But to me, that doesn't make sense because the criteria is not there. And I'm just confused. It did make sense to me. And I'm not trying to say anybody's being shady, because I know that's not the case. I just know that you have things to work out. And in the interim of working it all out, I do to actually make the attempt to get back to business. So I'm kind of caught in limbo, because I've had this meeting with them over and I still have the answers to questions, and I don't want to open my doors and then get in trouble.
Just let me follow up with that, but I will say something, because it's a good thing in terms of understanding a business model. And this is what I want. I always remind my businesses, when you can own it, and that includes the county, then let's own it. So I want to be crystal clear, and hopefully this can help others as well. See, if some of the division then told you in writing that, hey, disregard it, do A, B, and C, and we're going to give you your license to get going. And oh yeah, by the way, we plan to rewrite the ordinance later. As long as you and I can get that in writing and someone approves it and you get started and no one can come and take that away, see, you're down the road. Yep, me and you hope they immediately rewrite the ordinance so the person coming after you don't have to go through the hoops you went through. But my job in this regard is to help you get open. So even if I'm told the same thing, I just want the steps to get you open where no one can shut you down. And let the county in their own time change the ordinance for someone else. We just want to get to how do we help you get open.
I was told on the Zoom meeting the steps to open, which will disregard that portion of the ordinance. They will rewrite it. However, I need to purchase that license. And again, with COVID not being open, not getting my SBA money, I didn't get any of my stuff yet. I'm still waiting because I claimed for a hurricane and did some things. However, I don't really have that money, and I don't like it hard, because if there's a criteria, we should all be expected to meet that, not disregard it and just fee. So I'm kind of like at a loss, because I kind of feel like, and I don't want to use the word being extorted.
No. So again, just send me the letter. You send me the info, but I want to be clear with you. The objective is to get you open. And if the county said to do X, you're open. That's it. Let's get you open. Let's let you go make money. Period. Send me an email.
And it doesn't make sense if the ordinance says you say just do.
I'm sorry, the phone is going in and out. So again, for you, definitely, you and I'll communicate directly. Send me the email with all the devil in the details, all the information, and I'll get back in touch with you. Danberg, anyone else?
Okay, let's take a quick look here. Winifred McPherson notes, my employee was terminated with cause and applied and received unemployment. Is that legal?
Above my pay grade.
Yeah, I don't think that we're in a position today to be giving employment/unemployment benefit advice in that regard.
Oh,
I would concur with that. There's a lot of factors that go into that, in particular, whether or not the employer responded to the notice appropriately.
Yeah.
I will say to the person who asked the question, if they want legal advice on that we have great employment lawyers in my firm. I'll be happy to engage with her if she needs legal counsel.
thank you. And then let's see here. That was Athena. I believe that's what I've got in terms of my questions. If anybody wants to raise a very quick hand, or again, the survey is still open. We again encourage people to respond to that. But with that, I believe that is all the questions I've got for now.
Well, then let me take this opportunity again to thank our presenters. Thank you, Ms. Steed. Thank you, Ms. Cologne. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for sharing with our small businesses. And I must say that we had a hefty group to get started with. And I love the fact that I'm ending and I still have over 3/4 of who we started with. So that means you were engaging, you were inviting, and they certainly paid attention. So thank you also as our small businesses for participating today and joining us. This is how you actually stay connected with us. Again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as our YouTube. That URL code is a way that you can also receive our Wednesday newsletter. You get a lot of information from us on a regular basis. We try not to over-indate you with a whole bunch of stuff, but that's substantive stuff. Those things you need to know, those hot tips, know about bids before the bids ever hit the street. That comes out in our Wednesday newsletter. So with that, thank you, staff. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, small businesses, for participating. FITCI's coming up in November of this year. We're still having our Florida International Trade and Cultural Expo. So join us. We'll be back at the convention center. And with that said, thank you all. Have a great day and a greater week ahead.